welcome to the channel. I'm back to break down this Week 12 NFL DFS Thanksgiving slate on DraftKings. Before we get into it, if you could please leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future content that I upload. That would be greatly appreciated. And we're going to start breaking down this Thanksgiving Day slate where my projections, my rankings, my cheat sheets, all that stuff that I typically offer over there on Patreon will be free. I will be posting it on Patreon, so still follow the same link to get access. It'll just be a public post. Everyone can access these, give it back to you guys. So I have my projections up on the screen right now. And once again, this will be free. So all the stuff that I go over during the video, I'll have it posted by Wednesday night for you guys, latest, so that you'd be good to go for Thanksgiving Day. And then I'll be doing updates to it throughout the day to make sure that they are up to par. So with that being said, go ahead and check that out if interested, and let's go ahead and start breaking down this slate. So it is a 3-gamer on Thanksgiving Day. We have $1 million to first, so someone's got to win the million. One of it should be one of you guys if it's not going to be me. We're going to start breaking down some of the plays that I think are the most appealing. So first, looking at the QB position. As far as the QB matchups chart that I have is concerned, I like to start there, see like if there's some opportunities that we can capitalize on, who's been giving you the most DK points a game. And in this particular slate, you can see the Cowboys, the Texans, and the Lions are all top 20 in terms of DK points given up per game to target. Steelers and Ravens are going to be some tougher matchups, but first I want to start with is this matchup against the Cowboys, and who gets to take advantage of that is going to be Mr. Alex Smith for the Washington football team. Right now, I'm going to project for 16.51 DK points. Nothing really outstanding, but as far as who I am going to be teaming him up with, it all starts with his number one wideout in Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin has a very large involvement in this offense. Looking at his game logs and kind of how he's fared so far on the season, you can see that he's been really consistent throughout the year, and a lot of it has to do with his involvement and his target share. 5 receptions last week for 42 yards, didn't get in the end zone, or not 42 yards, 84 yards in total. He had a 42 long reception, 13.4 DK points. The week before, 9 targets, 8 targets the week before, 11 targets week 7, 22, 27, 18 DK points. You can see that week 7 matchup against the same Dallas team, he did put up 22 DK points, and I think he's in a good spot to repeat here. He didn't practice Monday, but it looks like I think it's just a cautionary thing. They're just giving him a little bit of rest because of the short week and playing on Thursday. So I wouldn't look into that too much. I think he'll be fine. And then, I had mentioned his involvement in the offense. So, I mean, looking at his numbers, we can see that he has a 99.3% snap share percentage, 86 targets on the year, 26.5 target share percentage. His average target distance is 9.9 yards, 13.8 yards per reception, 94.8 air yards per game. He's got a 91.9 true catch rate. 9 contested targets on 4 of those, he's brought it in. And then 8 red zone targets and 4 end zone targets. So you love to see that. Getting targeted in the red zone frequently, which is where, that's the pay dirt, as they say, and that's what we're looking for. We want those touchdowns. So as far as where I'm starting with Alex Smith, of course, you want to start with Terry McLaurin, grading out as a great play in my projections and in a great matchup. Don't forget that the Cowboys are actually one of the best teams to target in terms of wide receivers as well. The second best team to target on my matchup chart in terms of DK points given up against wide receivers. So Alex Smith, Terry McLaurin, I think it's a great place to start. And then don't forget about the running backs. Gibson is questionable right now with a questionable tag, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. He didn't practice on Monday, but he might be simply receiving some rest, they're saying. So going to have to keep an eye on these injury reports with the short week. I think a lot of these teams might just be giving their guys one day off sort of deal because of the short week and playing on Thursday, but have to monitor that news. And as far as, how the Cowboys have fared against the running back position, if we're looking to play any of these running backs, the Cowboys are the 16th best team to target, so not the best matchup. However, definitely not the worst. So we'll have to keep an eye on that throughout the week, but the only other place that I would mention definitely is the tight end in Logan Thomas. He's a guy that I had a lot of interest in last week. The Cowboys are the 19th best team to target in terms of tight ends and giving up fantasy points, so keep an eye on Logan Thomas because I think he's a little underpriced on DraftKings. He was definitely underpriced last week at only 3.3. Didn't pay out the greatest, but at 3.5, it's not like he got a huge bump in price, and I do think that we could definitely have some interest in him. So keep an eye on all that stuff. Moving further along in terms of who we're going to want to be playing. We definitely do have some good running back matchups on this slate. You can see we have actually the 2 top teams to target in terms of running backs. The very first is the Lions, giving up a ton of fantasy points to opposing running backs. 33.8 DK points a game, 337.8 DK points total. They're giving it up through the air. They're giving it up on the ground. They're just giving up a ton of points to running backs. So you got to keep an eye on that, and we're definitely going to want to play some running backs against these Lions. So, of course, with the David Johnson injury, right now it is all Duke Johnson's backfield, which honestly you love to see because it's just going to make our decision all that much easier. It's not a split backfield. Duke Johnson's getting the bulk of the carries. Last 2 weeks, he's been a big disappointment, only putting up 6 DK points in Week 11 and 5.4 in Week 10. But I do think that this is a great opportunity for him to get back on track due to the matchup, and with some recency bias being implied, we might get him lower owned than we typically would. You know, he's a guy that's been popular the last 2 weeks because he's taken on the big role, and he's really failed us. Anyone who's owned him, he's done terrible. So, honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I love that because it's just going to keep his ownership lower, and he gets literally the best matchup on the slate this week. Grades out pretty good on my model. I got him projected for 13.88 DK points as of now. Of course, that could always update, but you know, he's only played on 36.6% of the team's total snaps on the year, so that's just a good way of looking at the sample size as far as, you know, his impact on the team. But the over-under in this game does stand at 51, which really stands out as far as the rest of the slate's concerned. What are the top totals on the slate so far? We're still, these lines will be updated, of course, as Thursday gets closer, so look for those to change. But right now, top over-under, he has a 27 implied team total, and he has a great matchup, so I definitely have interest in him. And then let's not forget about the passing game for this Houston team, because it's not like the Lions have the top secondary either. They're the 16th best team to target in terms of DK points given up a game to QBs. And then when we're looking at wide receivers and how they fared against wide receivers, you can see that they are the 12th best team to target. So this game in general looks to be the shootout game, the top game on the slate in terms of points and everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a lot of ownership here, but Deshaun Watson does grade out as the second highest scorer on this slate for me with 21.22 DK points. He is more expensive than Lamar Jackson, however, and I do have Lamar projected for a better value and actually more fantasy points. So, you know, we can get there when we get there. That, of course, the Pittsburgh matchup isn't quite as good, but maybe playing Lamar Jackson on his own in your lineups makes some sense. But right now, let's focus on this Houston team. And, of course, it starts with Deshaun Watson. And then as far as his weapons on the outside that we're looking to pair him with, it all starts with Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. Randall Cobb does appear to be out in this game, so that'll be interesting because that's going to give some more target share to these guys, I think. 6-4 on DraftKings this week. Will Fuller hasn't really had a big week since Week 9 against Jacksonville, but I do think this is a spot he can get back on track here with a high over-under and the less than stellar secondary. So 12, 24, 8, 14 DK points the last 4 weeks out. I think he could get back up to more towards that 24-point range. And let's see where I got him projected right now. Will Fuller I have projected for 15.03 DK points. So at 6,400, I do think that's a pretty decent value, and I definitely do think that he has the upside in tournaments. And then the next guy that I want to discuss is Brandon Cooks, who I have projected 14.18 DK points this week. So, you know, Brandon Cooks would be the better value because he's only coming in at 5.3 compared to Will Fuller's 6.4K price tag. But, of course, if we're looking to stack these guys up in tournaments, we probably want to be playing both of these guys with Deshaun Watson because these are the top 2 targets in this offense. 5 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets, 9 targets the last 4 weeks for Cooks. Hasn't really seen like a huge, large upside game, but once again, like I said, high over-under, I think this is a spot where we can see these guys kind of start to get back on track of the big game, big play capabilities that they have. And then as far as, I didn't really mention the targets for Will Fuller, but 8 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets, 6 targets. So they're both getting targeted consistently. And then don't forget about the tight end and Akins, who I did mention last week, and he actually went out there and put up a pretty decent game. I mean, more than decent for his price tag. Last week he was only 2.5. He was my cheap option to play, and he went out there and put up 13.3 DK points, which is really, really good. That's going to treat you well in tournaments. He had 6 targets against that New England secondary. And as far as, how the Lions have been against tight ends this year, they are rating as my number 27 team to target, so not really the best in the matchup. But with that being said, Akins does have a cheaper price tag, so I still think he's viable on this slate. Moving further along, we can kind of just start breaking down these QBs as well, because it all starts with the QB, if we're being honest, if we're looking to stack up these teams. So Lamar Jackson taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a very, very good defense. They are actually the very, very worst team to target. It's very last. 32nd team to target in terms of DK points given up a game to QBs. And as far as how this game is rating out in my model from a Vegas total, they only have a 45 implied over-under and a 20.25 implied total for the Baltimore Ravens. However, Lamar Jackson is graded out to be my top scoring guy on the slate, and I do think he's a little bit underpriced at 6-8 this week. So I'm going to be promoting playing Lamar Jackson, even if you just play him on his own. I ideally would recommend stacking a quarterback with 2 of his options and then running it back with someone else in tournaments. I think that's the optimal play. However, if I'm putting in all these receivers and let's say, I have a bunch of Houston receivers and I can't quite fit in Deshaun Watson, I can't quite fit in that extra 600 in salary, I do think that it makes sense to just go down to Lamar Jackson if I love every other aspect of my lineup. I might not quite get the same upside as stacking up with Watson with his 2 wide receivers, but let's say, I'm missing out on like 5 DK points and I love the rest of my lineup. That could pay off in a tournament. So, it all starts with Lamar Jackson. Who you're targeting him with. Well, we should mention the run game this week because we got big news as far as this Baltimore backfield. J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram have both been placed on the COVID-19 list, so both of those guys are going to miss this game this week, and I think that's going to open up a ton of volume for Gus Edwards, obviously. He's a guy that we've seen involved in the run game as is, and now that those 2 guys are out on the COVID-19 list, he's going to get a ton of volume, I would assume. He's been seeing, he had 16, 11, and 7 attempts the 3 weeks prior, and then last week it kind of dipped down to 3, but now with no one else to battle with touches, or battle for with touches, I think he's going to see a ton of volume, and he's only 4K on DraftKings, so he's going to be probably very, very chalky, I would assume. And as far as my model is concerned and how he's grading out right now, I don't think this is going to stay the same. Right now I've got him projected for 6.19 DK points, but that's prior to updating my model with the news. So they're all news, I should say. I think that one's going to get a tick up in projection. So keep an eye on that. But I'm guessing he's going to be one of my best projected values on the slate. However, I do factor in matchups in my projections, and the Steelers are a real tough one because they are the 31st best team to target in terms of DK points given up to running backs, only giving up 17.4 DK points a game to the position. And it's a really, really tough matchup. So it'll be interesting to see how my projection model updates as we get closer to Thursday. But I do have to mention with those 2 guys going on, I definitely think he's viable, and it's really the price tag. He's only 4K. So even if he goes out there and he doesn't blow the world away with numbers, if he can go out there and put up 10 DK points, it's not going to kill you at all. So have to mention him as a play this week for sure. And then it all starts with the top 3 wide receivers on the outside: Hollywood Brown, Willie Snead, and Dez Bryant now. Marquise Brown has really been struggling, and it's not like Lamar Jackson's the top elite throwing QB. So as I'm breaking down this offense more and more, it's kind of becoming apparent. I don't know how much interest I have. However, you can get him low owned, and I can tell you one thing: Willie Snead has been getting a ton of targets. So this is a guy that I do think it's an interesting tournament play because of the terrible matchup and the low ownership. 7 for 7 targets, getting a ton of targets from Lamar Jackson. And then as far as how Dez Bryant has been doing since joining the team, he had 5 targets in his only appearance, and that's pretty good, honestly, for a 3.6 price tag. If he's going to get targeted that often in the offense, you got to love to see that. So, um, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but it does say that Bryant reverted to the Ravens practice squad on Monday. So, um, we'll see. I'm guessing they're going to put him back on the active roster before Thursday. That's an interesting thing to keep an eye on, but just want to mention that to you. So keep an eye on that if they're going to make him inactive this week. Maybe on a short week they make him inactive. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they would have signed him if they're not going to play him, but um, keep an eye on that one. And then on the other side of the ball, these Pittsburgh Steelers are just lighting the world up this year, both offensively, both defensively, undefeated on the year, haven't lost a game. And it all starts with Big Ben taking on the Baltimore Ravens, how they fared against QBs. They are the 23rd best team to target in terms of QBs. And then on the outside with the wide receivers, they're the 28th team. Both of these teams elite running backs. And then as far as running backs are concerned, they are the 19th. So their weakest link in their defense is running backs. But even with that being said, they're very solid against the position. But with that being said, I guess we could start our breakdown with James Conner. Don't forget about Big Ben, of course. We're stacking up the wide receivers. But as far as how James Conner grades out, he's 6.2 on DraftKings this week. Hasn't really had a big upside week, and I tend to think this won't be the one that it does happen. However, when looking at his game logs in Week 8 against this same Baltimore Ravens team, he did have 15 DK points, best performance on the year. Or not on the year, but best performance as of late, I should say. Best performance the last 4 games. So not exactly lighting the world on fire. And then how he grades out in my projection model, he comes in at 6.2. I got him projected for 14.64 DK points on the week. So I don't know. Not really too excited about that. But I mean, when you're picking a weak link to face off against in this Baltimore offense, and you're picking contrarian play, he makes sense. But I'm looking to stack up Big Ben with those wide receivers. It all starts with Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. Juju Smith-Schuster does have a questionable tag in this one. Got banged up last week. He was a non-participant in Monday's practice. And I don't know if, like, my lean as far as if he's going to play or not. I almost feel like no. I mean, they're undefeated. I don't think they're really too worried about making the playoffs, and I kind of feel like it's more important that their players are healthy come playoff time. So if you're asking me to guess right now as a first look early in the week, I'd guess no, which would bump up the target share for Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, who, I mean, Deontay Johnson's been going off 16 targets last week, 11 targets the week before, 10 targets the week before, 14, 26 DK points, and he finally got a little bit of respect going up into the 6K range on DraftKings as far as price tag is concerned. So you did see a price increase, though that can limit the appeal a little bit. But I mean, especially if Juju's out, these two guys is where it all starts. Even though they have a tough matchup, just the volume they're seeing, 9, 13, 10, 8 targets for Claypool. Love the start there. And then, of course, don't forget about the tight ends. Eric Ebron at 4-1. 7 targets last week, 13.6 DK points. So I think that he can keep it rolling as far as tight ends are concerned, and keep showing that high upside that he displays. So we've talked about Houston pretty much overall. We talked about Washington. We talked about Baltimore. We talked about Pitt. So let's just take a quick little look at our last 2 teams here in Detroit and Dallas. We'll start with Detroit. Right now I have Matthew Stafford projected for 17.46 DK points. Pretty good value on my sheet as far as how Houston's fared against QBs. They are the 15th best team to target with DK points given up. And wide receivers, they are the 11th best team to target. So pretty good matchup. Be interesting to see how these injury reports grade out for these Lions, because we do have quite a bit in question right now. Matthew Stafford's questionable. I think this is more of a caution questionable tag. I don't think he's going to be sitting out. I would look for him to be in, but keep an eye on him. And then we have Kenny Golladay, Marvin Hall, Danny Amendola. A lot of the wide receivers are questionable. So he was a limited participant Monday, so I tend to think he's going to be back on track to return in this one. And when looking at his game logs in weeks 4, 6, and 7, 16, 17, 20 DK points, Kenny Golladay, a guy that's been a fantasy stud the last few years. I think he's a pretty well-known name. And then you have Marvin Jones on the other side at 5,500. 6 targets, 10 targets, 4 targets, 7 targets. Those are the two guys I'm looking to start my stacks with. And then TJ Hawkinson, do not forget about him because he's been an absolute great tight end, but he was a limited participant with a shoulder injury. And he had a toe injury last week, picked up a shoulder injury, so we'll have to keep an eye on him. But if he's good to go, I definitely have interest in him. It makes sense to start your stacks with those guys. And then don't forget about the running game because DeAndre Swift does look like he'll most likely be out again this week. Keep an eye on that. But if he's out, it all starts with Kerryon Johnson and AP. And then they do have a very, very good matchup against this Texans team, which is the second best team to target in terms of running backs and DK points given up a game, giving up 30.9 DK points a game, 309.4 DK points on the year. So, yeah, the Lions and the Texans are literally the bottom two teams as far as limiting running backs in DK points, and they're both on this slate. So, I had mentioned Duke Johnson and how David Johnson's out, and now he gets all the workload. And then in this game, we're probably going to get a similar outlook as far as it'll either be Adrian Peterson or Kerryon Johnson. If I have a lean, I'm leaning Kerryon Johnson, honestly, because looking at what happened last week and their share on the offense, I don't really know that it's all Adrian Peterson. So Adrian Peterson led the backfield, but Johnson nonetheless handled his biggest role of the season. And I don't know. It just seems like Kerryon Johnson could be a sneaky play. I'll have to see how I'm feeling later on, but as far as looking at my matchup chart, they've been giving up a lot in the receiving category, and Kerryon Johnson is the receiving running back on this team. So that's kind of why I'm leaning Kerryon right now. We'll have to keep an eye on that, but the Texans have really been struggling to defend running backs out of the backfield, so I do think that Kerryon Johnson could be a sneaky play this week. Have to keep an eye on my projections, how they're altering and all that fun stuff. And then lastly, we got to talk about Dallas taking on this Washington football team. The Washington football team has been a very, very stellar defense this year, coming in as the 20th best team to target in terms of QBs. And then running backs, we do have Zeke on this team, so we want to know how they do against running backs, and they're 28th best team to target. So just very good overall, honestly. Going to be tough to target this one. Wide receivers, it doesn't really change much because they are the second best team as far as defending that position. So not the best spot to target. However, you could get them low owned. And this is a divisional game that's pretty important because the NFC East is absolutely terrible. The Eagles are in first place right now with 3 wins. And so if one of these teams can pick up a win in this one, it's actually going to hold a lot of value, a lot more value than you would think in a game that features, 2 teams with like 2 wins. So, but yeah, so just they're going to be going all out for this win is my point. And it all starts with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb on the outside. Amari Cooper, 7 targets, 6 targets, 5 targets. Hasn't really had a big game, and I don't really know that he's my favorite option because I can just go down 300 more to CeeDee Lamb, who has been pretty consistent, and I definitely think I like him more. 6 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets, 5 targets, been pretty consistent, and he's probably the guy that I'm looking to in this offense. And then as far as how they grade out in my projections, Amari Cooper does top CeeDee Lamb with a 13.25 projection in comparison to CeeDee Lamb, who has a 11.91 projection. And Amari Cooper is actually grading out better as far as value right now. So my projections do like Amari Cooper better. As far as my personal preference, we'll see as we get closer. I guess I was used to a little bit more of a price gap between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, which now looking 5.4 and 5.7, they're not that far apart anymore. So kind of thinking this through out loud, but that might be changing. And then Michael Gallup would be the third option at 3,500. We have seen his target share increase with Andy Dalton, I think. Looking to him, 12 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets the last 3 weeks. I think that with Andy Dalton, he could be seeing a bigger role in this offense. So look to him. So that's a first look at this Thanksgiving NFL DFS slate on DraftKings. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future content that I upload. Go ahead and check out my Patreon package, link below in the description, where you get access to all of my projections, my rankings, my cheat sheet, and all that stuff. I'm going to be giving away my Thanksgiving rankings and projections and all that stuff for free to give back to you guys. Appreciate your support. And if you're interested in purchasing it to get access to it every week, feel free. It's going to support me, and I greatly appreciate it. That is all from me. We will see you in the next video. Wish you all the best of luck on this Thanksgiving NFL DFS slate. Someone go win that million, and we'll see you in the next one.